There are moments when life doesn't collapse loudly. Nothing dramatic happens, no clear crisis, no visible emergency. And yet, something inside feels constantly under pressure. You wake up already tired. You go through the motions, work, responsibilities, conversations, but there's a quiet weight you can't quite name. You still pray, you still believe, but your prayers don't feel answered. They feel received, and then held in silence. It's not the kind of silence that brings peace. It's the kind that makes you wonder if you're doing something wrong, if your faith is weak, if your endurance is being mistaken for strength. These are not loud battles. They don't announce themselves. They don't leave obvious scars for others to notice. They are fought quietly, in the mind that won't rest, in the heart that stays alert even when nothing is happening, in the soul that keeps standing simply because it doesn't know how to fall. You're not running away from God. You haven't abandoned prayer. You're still here, but carrying more than you can explain. And maybe that's the hardest part. Nothing looks broken enough to justify how heavy this feels. If that's where you are right now, not in despair, but not at peace either, not losing faith, but quietly exhausted by it, stay. This moment isn't here to fix you. It isn't here to correct your feelings or rush you into hope. It's here to acknowledge the battle that no one else sees. Some struggles don't need to be solved immediately. They need to be named. And this is one of them. There is a specific kind of tiredness that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from holding yourself together for too long. It's the exhaustion of staying composed when you feel fragile inside, of showing up every day without knowing where the strength is coming from anymore, of continuing to believe, even when belief feels more like discipline than desire. Some days the fear isn't sharp, it's constant, not panic, not terror, just a steady sense that something could go wrong, or already has, quietly. You might notice it in small ways. Your thoughts loop at night. Your body stays tense, even at rest. You replay conversations, decisions, prayers, wondering if you missed something. And when you pray, you don't feel rebellious. You don't feel distant from God. You just feel unanswered. So you pray anyway, not because it feels powerful, but because stopping would feel like losing a part of yourself. There's also the weight of unspoken doubt. Not doubt about God's existence, but doubt about timing, about protection, about whether you are actually safe or simply surviving. You might ask yourself questions you never say out loud. Why am I still anxious if God is with me? Why do I feel exposed when I'm supposed to be protected? Why does faith feel heavier now than it used to? And the hardest part, you don't feel justified asking for help because nothing looks visibly wrong. No collapse, no dramatic loss, no clear explanation. Just this quiet pressure inside your chest, this alertness that never fully turns off. This sense that you are fighting something invisible and alone. But naming this matters because this kind of struggle is real and it is shared by more people than you realize. It doesn't mean your faith is failing. It means you've been strong for a long time without rest. This is not where solutions belong yet. This is not where answers rush in. This is simply the place where the truth is allowed to speak. Something hurts, even if it's quiet. One of the most unsettling experiences in faith is not suffering, it is silence, because silence leaves space for interpretation. And when you're already tired, that space often fills with doubt. You start wondering if God has stepped back, if your prayers are somehow being delayed, if the quiet means distance or disappointment or absence. But the silence of God has never meant abandonment. Scripture is full of moments where God is present without being loud, present without intervening immediately, present without explaining himself. God's silence is not absence. It is often where formation happens, not the kind of formation that feels inspiring, but the kind that strengthens roots beneath the surface. When everything is loud, faith is reactive. When everything is quiet, faith becomes internal. This silence exposes what we lean on when reassurance disappears. It reveals whether our trust depends on outcomes or on presence. And that is uncomfortable, because silence doesn't soothe the nervous system right away. It doesn't answer the what-ifs. It doesn't defend itself against our questions. Instead, it stays. God stays, not rushing to remove the battle, but standing with you inside it. This is where many people assume they are failing spiritually, because nothing feels resolved. But unresolved does not mean unprotected. There are seasons when God does not speak over the noise. He invites you to notice that He is already near, close enough to feel quiet with you, close enough to guard without announcing it, close enough to become your refuge, not by force, but by presence. Silence reshapes trust. It strips faith down to something simpler and deeper, not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in companionship. And that kind of faith does not grow in noise. It grows here, in the quiet. This is where Psalm 91 enters, not as a correction to what you're feeling, not as a command to be stronger, and not as a promise that everything suddenly makes sense. Psalm 91 does not deny danger. It does not pretend fear doesn't exist. It speaks to someone who already knows what it means to feel exposed. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This is not an image of escape. It is an image of proximity. To dwell means to remain, not to visit briefly, not to pass through quickly, but to stay. The shelter described here is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, a shadow, something close enough to cover you without pulling you away from where you are. Psalm 91 does not promise a life without battles. It promises a place within the battle where you are not alone. Refuge is not the absence of threat. Refuge is the presence of protection. This psalm walks beside the one who still feels the arrows, the fears, the thoughts, the quiet anxieties, but is no longer facing them unguarded. You don't have to feel fearless for this psalm to be true. You don't have to feel calm. You don't even have to feel strong. You only have to remain. The words of Psalm 91 do not rush you forward. They stand with you where you already are, in the quiet struggle, in the unseen tension, in the battle no one else knows you're fighting. This psalm does not shout victory. It whispers safety. Not safety as control, but safety as covering. A refuge does not explain the storm. It gives you a place to stand while the storm exists, and right now, that is enough. This is not a moment to analyze, not a moment to solve, not a moment to improve anything about yourself. This is a moment to soften. If you can, allow your shoulders to release just a little. Let your breathing slow, not forcefully, just naturally. There is nothing you need to achieve here. You don't have to prove faith. You don't have to hold everything together. Psalm 91 speaks of rest in the shadow, and shadows only exist when something is close. You are not exposed right now. Even if your mind feels alert, even if your heart feels guarded, you are not uncovered. Let the idea of refuge settle without effort. Refuge does not demand trust. It offers space. If thoughts arise, let them pass without engagement. You don't need to wrestle them. You don't need to correct them. Just notice that you are still here, still breathing, still held. God does not hover anxiously over your life. He covers quietly. You are allowed to rest without understanding. You are allowed to pause without clarity. You are allowed to exist without explanation. Nothing needs to shift immediately. Nothing needs to resolve in this moment. Stay here for a breath, then another. This rest is not escape. It is presence, and presence is enough. You don't need to leave this moment quickly. There is no signal telling you to move on yet. Quiet battles don't end with announcements. They soften, slowly, as presence becomes familiar. If Psalm 91 met you today, it wasn't to remove every fear. It was to remind you that fear does not mean exposure, that silence does not mean abandonment, that remaining is sometimes the deepest form of faith. Refuge is not something you run toward once. It is something you return to, day after day, and this is why these psalms continue, not to overwhelm you with answers, but to walk with you at a human pace. If this space felt steady, stay close. Let it become a quiet habit rather than a single moment. Let these words meet you again when the battles remain unseen. Nothing needs to be concluded right now. Nothing needs to be resolved tonight. Just remain. These psalms are here, not ahead of you, not behind you, but beside you. One quiet step at a time.